Functions, what they look like in Excel, what it means to be a live function versus a dormant one. And then we'll conclude with me introducing what I think is probably one of the most important functions you should have. Again, there's many you can explore, but at least for this class, and that's called a VLOOKUP, which is going to be how you join data for multiple tables, and we'll really use that one to conclude this video by joining some of this social capital data here to our other data sets so we can begin to analyze. But when you have formulas, and I'm going to, that new column I added, if you didn't add one, just, right click somewhere within the data and do insert and get a new column there. That's where I'm going to sort of store most of the stuff. And the way functions work is that you're effectively taking some elements of the data set, and I'm going to say equal, right? And there's a ton of them, right? Sum, max, median, replace, right? Find, all kinds of things we won't sort of cover. And when you do things, let's do a simple one like sum. It's just looking for sort of two numbers separated by commas or, by a colon in the middle to do a range. It'll sum things up. Whoops, shouldn't have made you a percent. Let's go back and make you general. There we go, it's 182. That's a function, right? You can do them across rows. You can also do them for your entire data set, right? I could come here and have a column I save here called maybe total or all students. And I could say sum and select the whole row, and it'll sum everything, right? And that's sort of all of the student data that I have right here. There's cool sort of text-based ones too. I could say replace and replace this text, start at the first number, go 5 characters, and the new text should be, cheese with a Z. And there you go, then it's Cheese Rail County, right? So there's all kinds of ways you can manipulate using functions. I don't want to get into sort of all of it right now, other than to say, tons of them, go online, start Googling all of the Excel functions. But I should talk a bit about how functions structure themselves, right? So if we start to do that sort of sum one, or maybe let's change this column here to dorm capacity, and dorm utilization. And what we could maybe do is take like the capacity of dorms they have, or they say they report, and the students that they have, and divide them, right? And then that would actually give us the number of dorm capacity divided by the students would tell me the percent of students that they could house, right? So in this instance, that institution could house 1.68 students. And the cool thing is I want you to copy that. I want you to select one row and then just drag and hold down like 5 or 6. And I want you to see how functions in Excel are dynamic. And what I mean by that is that if I click on it, it reminds me that this is this column, P2 divided by that column, hit enter. And if I click on the next one, I see that it has gone down. And if I click on the next one, it has gone down, right? And so on and so forth. So as I go down, the function is following me, and that's great. However, that means you can screw up sometimes, right? If I accidentally copied this over to the right, into column S, it's going to tell me it failed. Or not that it failed, sorry, because I have a value there now, but it's going to give me a really weird value because it's now dividing this by that, right? And if I were to do it here, and maybe copy it over, or rather copy it 2 over, it's going to fail, right? Because it's moving with me, and it's saying, hey, you're asking me to divide that by that. So again, the concept here is that functions move with you. There is a way to make them not do that, and it's going to really matter when I show you the VLOOKUP in a second. Sometimes it'll matter depending on where you look up your table from. But before we do the dorm utilization, what if instead of dorm utilization I made this like percent of total students, right? We know that the total students is that. And so what if I instead wanted to say, hey, you divide yourself by the total students, right? In my brain, that makes perfect sense. It's going to be a super small number, right? I don't have to go way down to get the sort of percentage. So that's the percent of all students that your college represents. And I'm going to start copying because I think what I'm doing is right, and it's just going to fail. And it's failing because it's moving down, right? It's using this, but it's moving down from that. So I want to do something that says, hey, wait a minute, for all my values, fix yourself there. You should always be the denominator. And the way you handle that is with the dollar sign. So the dollar sign fixes, either a row or a column. So if I were to say, hey, you, divide yourself by you, the letter U, darn it, that didn't work out because there ended up being a U, but this column divide by this column. Notice that Q and U are the columns, so those represent moving that way. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are the rows, so they represent moving up and down. So if I wanted this never to change moving up and down, right, I might put a dollar sign in front of the 2. And what that says is fix yourself. Always use this positional value 2, right? Because that's where that's stored. And then if I copy all the way down, get maybe down to the 16% or where it's easiest, now look at that, nice and easy. Now it's taking the unique value but dividing it by a fixed value. All right, so we won't often use the fixing, but it's important for you to know how to do it. So let's go back and sort of make it the dorm capacity that we had before. All right, and we'll sort of say, maybe I'll actually sort my students here. So I'm going to sort, instead of by dorm capacity, I'm going to now sort by the total number of students so that I don't divide by 0. And I'm going to say dorm capacity is equal to total dorm, dorm utilization is what we wanted to say. Dorm utilization. And that's going to be the dorm capacity divided by the total students. And then I'm going to copy, and the cool thing is I'm just going to selected the one row below, and then I'm going to drag all the way down to where I want to end my copy. And the reason I'm not doing these ones, they don't seem to have data on the number of students, and if I do the division right there, it's going to wind up a little wonky. It's going to divide by 0. I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to select in the final row, and the nice thing is that will then, if I hold the shift, select all the rows, and I can hit Control V paste, and there it goes, right? It pastes itself down. I've got data on dorm utilization. In a second, we'll go in and fix these funny outliers where someone says, I have 40 capacity but only 22 students. I mean, maybe there's an irony there. It just means that they don't have as many students as they have ability to sort of house, right? They have more dorms than they do actual students. So last thing I'll do before I teach you the really critical function that ends this video called VLOOKUP. These are live, and that's really important. There are some times, like those of you who are PPD and whatnot, you'll see like when you do a pro forma, you usually are going to keep functions live because you're going to be like replacing input data on another spreadsheet and you want it to populate the other records. But when you have something like this, like having live could be messed up if I, accidentally delete a row or if I sort accidentally or if things move over. And so sometimes, like, I'm good with dorm utilization. I don't need it to be a live function anymore. I'm not changing this data. So you can actually come up and copy an entire row, go to what's called paste special, and select values. And when you do that, it just gets rid of the formula. You're like, formula's done my part. Now I just have my data in here. Cool? Okay, so the last function we're going to end this with is called the VLOOKUP. And here's what I'm really wanting to do. I have a really great data set here with IPEDS. But I have these 3 pieces of data that I want to bring over, right? Connectedness, clustering, and volunteering. I want this information here, right? Because I want to be able in my final video when I analyze and do statistics to have all the data in a single data set. We're going to do the same function you'd learn in ArcGIS, which is a join, right? Same thing you'd have in R, an inner and outer join, a table join. We need to take a common, unique, identical value that can match row to row in the IPEDS data and match it up with the other one. So just like the join video on ArcPro, we first have to find an ID that is identical, right? And in this instance, it's the Office of Post-Secondary ID right here. You can look around for, unique colleges if you want, just to make sure it signs up. You got Abilene Christian here. Oops, scooch it over here. Abilene Christian, 353-700, 353. Oops. 353-700 for Abilene Christian, 353-700. So I've got the one that I want, right? That's going to be the thing I want to join. So whenever you want to bring data, right, the first thing you want to do is likely set a couple of columns, right? So insert 3 because we're bringing 3 things over. And what we're going to bring over is called connectedness, clustering, and volunteering, right? Those three values that we got from the social capital research page. And you're going to type, again, what I consider to be one of the most important functions in Excel, which is called VLOOKUP. There's a cousin of this that does the same thing, but in a different direction, called HLOOKUP, that you don't need to learn yet. VLOOKUP, and like anything in Excel, it's going to tell you the 4 inputs or the 5 inputs or however many it wants, each input separated by a comma. First thing it wants is the lookup value. So think about this in terms of like ArcPro, if you watch the videos on joining first. This is the target value, right? Hey, what value am I trying to join to? Well, you're going to do this one, right? You're going to take this ID, the Office of Post-Secondary ID, that's going to be your 1. Bing, bada, boom. We'll fix that. We'll do a comma. Table array. Think about this as where am I joining the data to, right? What are all of the possible columns that I might be trying to join? That's coming from over here, right? My table array is going to be these values, right? Connectedness, clustering, and volunteering. But in order to get to them, I need to recognize that the actual data point I'm joining to is over here in column A, college OPEID. So I actually have to start there because the way that a VLOOKUP works is the lookup value, right, that first thing, this code, will look for a match in the table array in the first column, right? So if I start my table array, and I'll show you how to do it in a second, at college OPEID, that's the field it's going to look for to find a match. If I start by college name or I start by mean student cohort, it's going to be looking for things that it's not going to match, right? Because the actual target value here, the lookup value, is the Office of Post-Secondary Education. So I'll click on my other data set, and I'm going to start selecting right where I want to start looking at my data. And usually what I like to do, you can drag and hold the whole time if you want. You know, drag over all the way to the right. You can go all the way to the bottom and hold shift at the end. And again, what you're doing, and you can see it up here, saying, hey, I'm taking it from a spreadsheet called Social Capital Reduced, right? That's what's in the brackets. I'm taking it from a tab called Social Capital College. That's what's right here. And I'm taking the values. Notice the dollar signs we just learned, so it's not going to move. That's really, really helpful in this, right? Because you wouldn't want it moving around the VLOOKUP table. I'm going to be looking up my values starting up here in A2, right here. I'm looking up in the A column. And I'm possibly allowing you to bring back any and all data in the other columns. And when you do your lookups, start at A2 and go all the way down to row 2518. That's your table array. Go back to the original data set and put comma, because now we're on to our third value, which is column index number. All this means is a complex way of saying, if I just made my table array, OPE, then name, ENS per hour, connectedness, clustering, and volunteering, I now need a way to tell it, well, here I'm trying to take the connectedness value. So it's effectively looking for the column index, right? The positional value or positional place where connectedness lies. And if A was my first column, that's 1. College name is 2. Mean student is C. Oh my goodness, that would be 4, right? It's the 4th positional column. Finally, for range lookup, I find it's just good to do false. We don't have to get into sort of true yet. That allows for there to be like a fuzzy matching algorithm. So just do false, meaning you have to actually exact one-to-one match. And I screwed something up. So what did I do? I've got my B. My B is my OPEID. That also maybe just could be that one's not in the other data. So I'm going to copy up and down. Perfect. All right. Whew, I didn't screw up. So that happens sometimes, right? Maybe just that the first value here didn't have a match in the other, and that's good, and that's why it came up as NA. But I could copy it down, and I see that values start to actually come. I'm not going to do this, but I just want to visualize this for you. If I were to change that column index to 2, right, which is the positional location of where college name is, then college name would come, right? If I were to do it where the 1 is, then the lookup value, right? So you use that position index to effectively bring back the data that you want, which in this instance is sort of the connectiveness file right here, right? So it's 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep just for Abilene Christian right here. Because what I need to do now, right, is I want to copy it over and just make it easier for clustering and volunteering, right? So we know clustering would be the 5th column, volunteering would be the 6th. But there's something critical I need to do, right? If I just copy this over, it's going to say NA. And it's going to say NA because, remember, Excel functions are dynamic. B4, if I move over, right, 1, that's looking up B, that's what's blue. I move over 1, it also moves over 1. Now it's looking up Abilene Christian in this data, and it's not going to find that in the college OPE ID. So I need a way, with that trick I just learned, to fix my position. So just do this, right? Almost the opposite of what we just did. Hey, I don't ever want you to move your row or your column. Always B and B, dollar before B. And now I can drag and drop it over here. Bing, bada, boom. And change these columns. You should be 5. You should be 6, because that's where clustering and volunteering are from. I can turn this all to % to make it a little bit easier to visualize. And now I can take these, put a position in the top, scroll all the way down, hit Shift, and paste. And there we go. Anywhere where I was able to find a match, right? Again, not all of the, like I have more in the IPEDS than I do in the social capital file. And so anywhere where there's not able to find a match, it'll put an NA. I copied it all and just did paste special values. Right, and then I can get rid of that NA data if I want. I could go by descending, select all the columns that have NA and just sort of clear them, so it doesn't screw up the calculations that I'm going to do next. And bing, bada, boom. That is VLOOKUP, right? An excellent tool that allows you to use a shared value, in this instance, the ID, and bring over information from one table into another. All right, now we can go check. Have we done this right? Well, Anila Nakota has a 0 connectedness, a 55 clustering, and a 1.2 volunteering. There we go. Those are the values that are in that positional area. So we've just done a join in Excel, right? It's the same concept, but you use different language called VLOOKUP. Save your data, and then in the next video, we're going to play around with pivot table to sort of close out our Excel discussions.